Hey guys, tonight we plunge headfirst literally into the shadowy, sludge-soaked underworld of medieval life. Picture this, it's pitch black. The tunnel around you is narrow, wet, and reeks of a smell no candle could ever conquer. Your boots squelch in layers of slime, and you're not even sure what's sloshing up your thighs, best not to ask. Rats skitter past your ankles. Somewhere ahead, something drips. Slowly, menacingly. Welcome to the glamorous life of a medieval sewer diver. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move with cautious purpose, bent nearly double as you inch forward through the city's main waste channel. The year is 1348. You're in London. And no, this isn't the Tower or the market or some candlelit tavern with fire-roasted mutton. You're in the underbelly, the real guts of the city. You're what the royal records politely call a gong scourer, but in everyday parlance, you're just a sewer man. Your job: keep the cesspits from overflowing. It's a vital public health rule. Technically, but don't expect a medal. Armed with a long scraping paddle and a burlap sack, you gather the night soil, a cheerful euphemism for what you really deal with. There's no modern plumbing here. Waste flows from chamber pots dumped into street drains and communal latrines, winding its way down into foul, subterranean rivers where it waits for brave or desperate souls like you. The pay is decent. Surprisingly, danger pay, you could say, but the cost? Oh, just your sense of smell, your skin, your dignity, and occasionally your life. Gas buildup is no joke down here. One wrong strike of flint or torch, and you're suddenly doing pyrotechnics in a methane-rich nightmare. It's the kind of occupational hazard that makes you seriously reconsider your career choices. If you survive the explosion, that is, your tunic, soaked and stained, clings to you in the most unfashionable of ways. You've tied a cloth over your mouth and nose, but it barely helps. Breathing through your mouth doesn't make it better. Either just wetter, the stench becomes a flavor, a seasoning on your very soul. As you reach into a blockage, some ancient mass of debris, bones, rags, and is that a jawbone? You remember your master's advice. Always test the ceiling before standing. Rats fall, bricks shift, occasionally human skulls dislodge. Medieval infrastructure is charming like that. Historians still argue whether the more elite gong farmers worked only at night because of law, superstition, or simply to spare the townsfolk the sight and smell. Some records suggest legal ordinances restricted cesspit cleaning to post-sunset hours. Others imply it was an unspoken rule of common decency. Either way, you work by moonlight. At least it's quiet down here. Sort of peaceful, if you ignore the occasional rat squeak symphony or the weirdly rhythmic dripping that always seems to come from directly behind you. Is that breathing? No. No, it's just your imagination. Probably. You find a particularly stubborn chunk of waste dense. Compacted. Maybe years old. You wedge your paddle in, grunt, and haul. It resists. You slip. Face first into the slop. And for one beautiful moment, all sound and thought disappear in the brownish-black silence of sewage. You surface, sputtering. You'll taste this for weeks. One quirky side note. Some brave souls believe the sewer air called miasma was actually good for certain diseases, like consumption. They thought foul air would scare away bad humors. Irony smells a lot like human waste, apparently. You haul another sack toward the nearest exit chute, where a winch system hoists it up to street level. The contents will be carted off to be dumped somewhere far away, hopefully outside city limits. Sometimes, farmers buy it as fertilizer, and they say organic farming is new. Your fingers, raw and blistered, ache from gripping the slimy paddle. You haven't felt your toes in hours. You pause. Listen. Somewhere above, a church bell tolls. You count midnight. Still hours to go. Up ahead, the tunnel narrows further. You sigh. It always narrows. This is the part where you crawl. Dropping to your knees, you squeeze your shoulders in, 1 inch at a time. The bricks ooze moisture. The air is stale and still. You press on because this job, disgusting as it is, means your family eats. They wait for you at home, probably asleep. Your wife will make you stand in the river before entering the house again. Your kids joke that you smell like boiled dragon, but they hug you anyway. You do this 6 nights a week. The seventh, that's for repairing your gear, scrubbing your boots, and dreaming wildly, vividly of becoming a baker, or a shepherd, or literally anything else. But for now, you keep going. One sack, one scoop, one breath at a time, because someone has to keep the city clean. You drag your weary legs from the sewer and trade one kind of stink for another. Your next gig isn't quite as underground, but it might be worse because now it's not just your nose under assault. It's your feet, too. Welcome to the noble profession of the fuller. You arrive at the workshop just as the first rays of sun break through a smoky haze. It's not the pretty kind of sunrise. This light filters through soot and fog and the fumes of something far more sinister, stale human urine. Yes, urine, pungent, plentiful, and apparently perfect for processing wool. Your job as a fuller is to cleanse, soften, and thicken raw woolen cloth, a step absolutely essential to medieval fabric making. Before fullers came along, people just wore scratchy sacks. You're the unsung hero of sweater comfort. Only you don't get a parade or a scented candle named after you. You get pea barrels. The process goes like this. Freshly woven wool comes stiff and greasy from lanolin and dirt. To make it wearable, you need to scour it in a mix of liquids that, well, break down the gunk. Enter urine, a natural source of ammonia. The stronger, the better. Some towns even had public receptacles where citizens could donate their contribution to the cause. Talk about community spirit. You remove your shoes. Yes, seriously. This job is done barefoot, so you can really get into it stomping down on wool submerged in warm, acidic liquid for hours at a time. Think of it like grape stomping, but without the wine, joy, or dignity. The cloth sloshes and squishes beneath you. It's still early, but the smell has already climbed into your nostrils and set up camp. You try breathing through your mouth again. That old trick never works. And yet, despite the sensory torture, your motions become rhythmic. You press the wool down with your heel, pivot, step, and repeat. The cloth resists at first, but slowly it begins to transform softer, tighter, more cohesive. You're making fabric strong enough for tunics, hose, and cloaks, clothing that can withstand a medieval winter or a joust or 3 toddlers. Historians still argue whether some fullers used imported substances like fuller's earth or alkaline clays to supplement the urine. In wealthier cities, it's possible, but in most towns, the bucket method reigned supreme. Free, local, and endlessly renewable. Unfortunately, the workshop buzzes with low conversation and the occasional curse as someone slips in the muck. One guy lost a toenail last week. No one talks about it. You spot a rat nibbling the corner of a half-finished tunic. It looks up at you, unbothered. You both understand your place in the world. Here's a quirky side note in ancient Rome. Fulling was already a thing, and Emperor Vespasian even taxed public urine collection. The Latin phrase pecunia non olet money doesn't stink originated from this very tax. The medieval world. Less concerned with catchy proverbs, more focused on not slipping into the vat. Around midday, you take a break. You step outside and wring out your tunic, which somehow makes it worse. A breeze passes and everyone nearby instantly takes 2 steps back. You're not offended. You've stopped noticing. Lunch is a hunk of bread and some dried peas. You eat with your fingers, pausing now and then to flick away whatever stuck to your skin from the morning's work. You'd wash your hands. But with what, there's a trough nearby. But you're not convinced it's cleaner than your current situation. By late afternoon, the wool is done soaking and gets passed to the next crew beaters and stretchers. You massage feeling back into your ankles and wipe your legs with a scrap of cloth that smells only slightly less awful than everything else. You start prepping the next batch. It's endless. Wool and stomp, soak, twist, repeat. It's not a job you grow to love. It's a job you grow around, like moss or a callus. Your coworkers joke, tell stories, pass time the best they can. One guy claims he used to be a minstrel before a scandal with a bishop's daughter got him reassigned. Another swears that peeing in your own vat makes it work faster. No one's willing to test that one out. Yet, as twilight falls, your shift ends. You drag yourself home through streets that smell surprisingly clean by comparison. The irony doesn't escape you. Your wife doesn't greet you at the door, she greets you from across the yard, waving a bucket of rainwater and shouting, "Don't take another step. I swear you rinse." Poorly. Then she lets you in. The house is small but warm. Your youngest runs up to hug your legs, then immediately regrets it. You sit down for dinner and realize, too late, that your knees still squelch when you bend them. You eat, sleep, and dream of wool endless fabric underfoot. In your dream, it smells like lavender, which tells you it's definitely a dream. And tomorrow you'll be back in the vat. You awake with sore calves and a slight, lingering sense that your toes may never be the same again. But at least today, your job requires shoes. Nice ones. Even polished leather slippers. Perhaps, though, you won't be walking much. No, today you're spending most of your time kneeling or hovering awkwardly near another man's throne. Welcome to court. You are the groom of the stool. That's not a nickname. That's your actual title. And yes, it means exactly what you think it does. The throne isn't metaphorical. It's a padded wood-framed commode with a velvet-lined hole and a chamber pot beneath. The man who sits on it. The king? Your king. You, meanwhile, are the trusted servant in charge of wiping royal posteriors, managing toilet logistics, and keeping detailed records of His Majesty's bowel health. Yes, you keep a logbook. Of logs. The court doesn't openly mock you, of course. To their credit, they usually avert their eyes when you pass. But despite the obvious indignities of the role, you wield quiet power. You have the monarch's ear often when no one else is allowed in the room. And if you're kneeling by the royal nether regions, you're probably closer to political secrets than half the Privy Council. That, historians believe, is partly why this role was so strangely respected. The groom of the stool wasn't just a glorified bidet technician. You were a confidant, an organizer, a gatekeeper of information. The job was often given to noblemen, and if you did well, you could climb the ladder to actual titles, land, and real court influence. Still, no one ever forgets what you did to get there. The king this morning is Henry VIII, or maybe Edward VI. Doesn't matter much, you're stuck with the same view. He nods as you prepare his linen cloths and scented water. The royal diet has not been kind to his digestive system. You've learned to read his expressions with the precision of a seasoned sailor watching for storm clouds. You dab at the corners of your eyes? Is that from the smell or the emotion of it all? Hard to say. You're expected to maintain utmost decorum. You don't react. You don't speak unless spoken to. You certainly don't offer unsolicited commentary on anything. One ill-timed gag reflex and you could be feeding swans in the tower moat by sundown. One fun little tidbit: the groom didn't just handle cleanup. You also arranged the royal wardrobe, travel trunks, and ensured that fresh undergarments were always at the ready. In a way, you're like a cross between a personal assistant, a butler, and a very specialized nurse, with fewer thank yous. Historians still argue whether this position truly involved wiping duties throughout its full tenure, or if by the late medieval period it had become more ceremonial. Some suggest the king cleaned himself and the groom simply stood by. But written records don't exactly clarify the hands-on versus hands-off debate. Today, it's definitely hands-on. You clean and sanitize the area, tidy up the chamber pot, and help the king redress with layers upon layers of brocade, velvet, and fur. Royal fashion is elaborate and not very breathable, which is probably why you're back here at least 4 times a day. Once he's ready, the king nods again. A signal, you bow, step back, and disappear into a side corridor where the real chaos begins: laundry, sanitizing tools, and worst of all, paperwork. Yes, you file a report. It's not just about digestion, though. You also note patterns. Appetite changes, skin tone, emotional outbursts because, believe it or not, you're also a kind of health observer. If the monarch starts looking jaundiced or unusually agitated, you're expected to discreetly alert the royal physician, or whisper it to a trusted advisor, or pass it on via coded phrases like, "His Majesty seemed pensive this morning." You're also often present during those blurry pre-dawn moments when a half-asleep king mumbles state secrets or names you've never heard before. You pretend not to hear, but you do. At dinner, you're seated away from the nobles, closer to the staff, but still in your own awkward little rank. No one wants to sit near the stool guy, but everyone wants to know what the stool guy knows. It's a lonely job, and yet some men use this role to climb far. One groom of the stool, Hugh Dennis, reportedly used his influence under Henry VII to shape crown finances. Another, Sir Anthony Denny, became a close confidant of Henry VIII in his later years, managing even his will and succession. So yes, you may be wiping today, but you could be rewriting history tomorrow. You retire to your chamber, a modest room near the privy quarters. You wash your hands in rose-scented water, light a candle, and stare blankly at the flame. You don't remember blinking all day. Eventually, as you lay down on your cot, the smell of lavender barely masking the ghosts of the morning, you think for a moment about what life might have been like as a simple monk or blacksmith. But then again, they never got invited to royal hunting trips. You drift off to sleep. Tomorrow's linens folded at your bedside. The morning air is sharp, thick with the scent of damp earth and old blood. You squint at the rising sun, already streaking the sky with red and omen. Maybe, or just another day at work. You are a tanner, and today, like every day, your job is to transform dead animal skins into usable leather. You do it with your hands, your nose, and a constitution most people can't imagine without vomiting. There's no glamour here, no applause, just you, a knife, and a vat full of pungent liquid you really hope doesn't splash. You arrive at the tannery before the town stirs. A pile of fresh hides waits at the gate, fresh meaning steaming with decay. The butcher must have dropped them off after midnight. It's better when they're freshish. If they rot too long, even you can't handle the smell. You start by scraping. Each hide is stretched over a beam, and with a dull, curved blade, you work to strip away the fat, muscle, and hair. It's slow work, and your hands blister despite the leather gloves. Your back aches. Your lungs tighten. It doesn't help that you're standing ankle deep in old skin trimmings and water that's more sludge than liquid. Every step you take squelches. There are no clean surfaces here, just varying levels of disgusting. And yet, the town relies on you. Without leather, there are no boots, belts, saddles, or bookbindings. You're the invisible engine behind everything they use, just don't expect a thank you. Next step, the lime vats. You dunk the cleaned hides into a bath of lime and water. This loosens the remaining hair and begins the process of toughening the skin. You use a long pole to stir the hides. Careful not to fall in. The solution is caustic. Get it in your eyes or a cut and you'll remember it forever. Historians still argue whether medieval tanners developed lime-resistant footwear or simply went barefoot and hoped for the best. Some archaeological evidence points to crude leather clogs, but plenty of period drawings show bare feet in the muck. Either way, you're not exactly OSHA compliant. After soaking, the hides go into another charming solution: animal brains. Yes, you heard that right. Brains contain natural emulsifiers, lecithin, that help soften the hides. You knead each soaking wet skin by hand, working brain matter into every crease. It's slimy, warm, not entirely unlike handling overcooked porridge with a pulse. Here's a fun side note. Some cultures used dog dung instead of brains. It did the same job, and it was free. That choice depended on what was more readily available or which smell you hated less. You personally aren't picky. At this point, your sense of smell is more memory than function. After the brains, you stretch the hides on wooden frames to dry. This part is almost peaceful. The leather flaps gently in the breeze, and for a moment, the stench recedes. Your apprentice hands you a cup of ale. It's warm and flat, but it cuts the edge of the morning. You look at your hands, permanently stained, cracked. You've been doing this since you were 12. Now you're 30-something, maybe. You stopped keeping track after the big fire that destroyed half the tannery and took all the payroll records. By noon, your clothes are stiff with grime. A smear of lye burns your forearm, and you rinse it in a bucket with yesterday's water. It doesn't help much. You grit your teeth and return to the hides. People cross the street when you walk by. That's not an exaggeration, it's a habit. Tanners smell like death, bile, and low taxes. Even the town priest waves you in from a distance when he sees you in the back pew. You're allowed to attend services. Sure, just preferably downwind. Despite that, you earn a modest living. Leather is always in demand, and your trade is protected by the guild. You've even trained 3 apprentices, though one ran off to become a weaver. Coward. Tonight, you'll go home to your small cottage near the river, the only place that willingly lets tanners live. The river's useful for dumping leftover scraps. Fish don't bite there anymore, but you weren't planning on fishing anyway. You strip off your work clothes outside. Your partner leaves a basin of rosemary water by the door, a small kindness. You soak your hands. The rosemary doesn't mask the smell, but it reminds you of better things, like fresh bread, or the time your youngest said, "Papa smells like dragons," with a grin. You lie down on your straw mattress, still sore, still stained, but strangely satisfied. You made something today, something useful, something that will last years, maybe decades. You close your eyes, already hearing the creak of the tannery door swinging open again tomorrow. And the smell. It never leaves. The crowd begins to gather just after dawn, some sleepy-eyed, others eager, almost too eager, like they've arrived early for a festival. There's bread to snack on, ale to sip, children hoisted onto shoulders to get a better view. They lean on stone walls, peering at the central square. Because today, the village has scheduled a spectacle, and you're the executioner. You stand behind a screen, sharpening your axe with slow, deliberate strokes. It's heavy not just in weight, but in reputation. This blade has ended lives. It carries stories in every nick, every faint stain that never fully scrubbed out. It's been passed down from the last guy who had your job. He retired, probably, or left town suddenly, depending who you ask. Your black hood rests on a peg nearby. You don't always wear it, but today's a big day. A nobleman is on the list. When it's someone important, you keep it anonymous. No one wants to recognize the face swinging the axe that separates Lord So-and-so from his flowery rhetoric. The job isn't glamorous, but it's essential. Justice needs a face. They say, but apparently not yours. You're the necessary villain in the play of law and order. The iron fist beneath the velvet glove. And no matter how smoothly you work, they still whisper behind your back. As you walk toward the platform, the wooden boards groan beneath your boots. You've walked this path so many times the creaks almost play a tune. The town square hushes slightly, like everyone just remembered someone's actually going to die. Historians still argue whether executioners were social outcasts by law or just tradition. In many towns, they lived at the edge of settlements, ate alone, and were denied burial in consecrated ground. Others, curiously, were respected, especially if they executed cleanly and without spectacle. A fast hand earned a strange sort of admiration. You spent years perfecting your form. The goal is one stroke. No sawing, no second swing. Anything less. And the murmurs follow you for weeks. Did you see how he botched that one? Poor soul didn't go clean. The worst are the gasps. The mothers covering their children's eyes too late. You approach the condemned, a man, maybe mid-40s, pale, trying to stand tall, but his knees are giving him away. You meet his eyes for a split second. Sometimes they plead, sometimes they burn with rage. This one resigned. You say nothing. The priest says enough for both of you. A quirky historical note executioners were sometimes paid extra for cleaning up afterward. Heads had to be presented, sometimes boiled and tarred, then mounted on spikes, and who better to handle that than the man who removed it? You raise the axe. This moment stretches. The air thickens. The blade feels heavier than usual. You breathe through your nose and steady your grip. Then crack. The blade lands. One clean stroke. The body slumps forward. The crowd releases its collective breath. A few people cheer. Some look away, sickened. You step back, wipe the blade, and nod at your assistant. He wraps the remains, drags them from view. It's a well-rehearsed routine. Every step has its place. Every motion, its meaning. You descend the platform without looking at the crowd. You never do. If you make eye contact, you risk seeing someone you recognize, or worse, someone who recognizes you. Back at your quarters, you shed the tunic. Scrub your hands, though some stains always linger. There's a jug of cider on the table, and you drink straight from it. It doesn't taste good, but it quiets your hands. You remember the first time? A thief? Young, you missed twice? People laughed. Someone threw a turnip. You didn't eat for days, but you got better. You had to. Sometimes you wonder if this is what you were born to do, or if you were just the only one who didn't run when the last guy quit. There's a strange intimacy to your job. You're the last face a person sees. The final witness. In a twisted way, it's sacred. But no one invites the executioner to weddings. You walk into the tavern and conversations stutter. You're necessary, yes, but never welcome. Some towns assign other duties to you, collecting taxes, disposing of animal carcasses, even acting as torturer when required. That's another messy corner of the trade. Not every town separates justice from punishment. You do what's asked, you don't get choices. You keep a journal tucked beneath your floorboards. Just names, dates, a few last words, some of them poetic, some ridiculous. One man asked if he could just nap here instead. You chuckled for days. As the sun dips below the rooftops, you light a single candle. The flame flickers like it's nervous, too. Tomorrow's list has two names: a thief, a woman accused of witchcraft. You try not to read ahead. You tell yourself it's just a job, a trade like any other. But at night, when it's quiet, you sometimes hear phantom applause or screaming. Depends on the day. And you always clean the blade before sleep. You wake to the sound of a bell tolling. Not the pleasant chime of morning mass, but the deep, heavy clang of the death cart rolling through the streets. The sound that says someone else didn't make it through the night. And you're the one who comes to collect. You're a plague barrier. And today, like yesterday, and the day before, you carry the weight of death. Not metaphorically, literally, on your shoulders, in your cart, in your dreams. The city smells like fear and spoiled meat. It's the mid-1300s, and the Black Death is no longer a whisper. It's a scream. Half the town is gone. The other half won't open their doors. You pull a cart behind you, wheels creaking over cobblestones, slick with morning frost and God knows what else. The bell rings again. You ring it yourself. It's not a call for help, it's a warning. Bring out your dead. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they just toss a body into the street and slam the shutters closed. You don't blame them. You barely look yourself. The bodies come in all sizes: men, women, children pale, swollen, and covered in those telltale buboes, like dark marbles pushing through the skin. You cover your nose with a cloth soaked in vinegar. It helps. A little. You've tried rose petals, burning herbs, even a slice of onion jammed in each nostril. None of it quite works. One quirky historical method involved stuffing pockets with crushed emeralds or wearing amulets made from dried toads. The logic: if the disease was spread by bad air, then anything smelly, shiny, or mystical might scare it off. Needless to say, results were mixed. You sling the next body onto the cart. Your partner mutters a prayer under his breath. You stopped doing that weeks ago. Not out of disrespect, you just ran out of prayers. You trudge toward the edge of town. That's where the pits are. Deep trenches dug with shaking hands and no ceremony. Graves by the dozen. The earth around them is so churned and soft that you have to tread carefully, or you'll end up down there with your cargo. Historians still argue whether plague barriers were hired by the church, the city, or were just desperate volunteers. Some say they were convicts, promised freedom if they survived the job. Others claim entire families were pressed into service when no one else would step forward. The records are patchy, like the town itself. You remember when the first cases started. Just a cough, then a fever, then swelling, then screams, then silence. They died faster than you could count. Some within hours. You dump the latest load into the pit. There's no time for names. You throw a handful of lime over the pile. It smokes faintly in the cold. They say it purifies. You're not convinced. Back in town, people avoid your eyes. You're a walking omen. A shadow of a future they're trying not to imagine. No one invites you in for soup. No one says thank you. You once knocked on the door of an old friend. His daughter answered, saw your coat, and slammed the door so hard it cracked the frame. You're not mad. You understand. You eat in alleyways. Sleep in a storage shed near the burial ground. You burned your old clothes weeks ago. Your hair, too. Anything to stop the itching. The paranoia. You don't know if you've had it already and survived, or if it's just not your turn yet. There's a rumor going around that cats are to blame. Or maybe dogs. Or witches. Someone suggested it was bad astrology. You suggested maybe it was rats, and got a boot thrown at you for your trouble. You keep your thoughts to yourself now. By nightfall, your cart is empty. For now. You clean it with boiling water and scrub the wheels with lye. It doesn't matter, the smell is eternal. A man approaches you ragged, nervous. Says his wife's coughing. He won't say it out loud, but you both know what that means. You hand him a scrap of linen. Tell him to wrap her up tight and wait for the bell tomorrow. It's all you can offer. Later, in your makeshift shelter, you sit with a candle and stare at your hands. They don't feel like yours anymore. Too many knots. Too much dirt under the nails. Too many goodbyes. You remember your mother's voice if you're going to dig holes? Dig deep. You didn't realize she meant graves. You lie back on your pile of rags. Outside, an owl hoots. Somewhere, a child cries. The city sleeps restlessly. dreaming of fever and fire. And you'll be back in the streets tomorrow. Bell in hand, cart behind, death ahead. You step into the mill just after dawn, greeted by a flurry of flour dust that coats your eyelashes before you've even said good morning. The air is thick with it, sweet and chalky, and you know it'll be in your lungs by nightfall. You're a miller, and your days revolve around the grind. Literally, the mill creaks and groans like an old man with a grudge. It's powered by water, and the wheel outside churns steadily, pulling the gears that turn the heavy millstones. Inside, everything vibrates ever so slightly, like the building's alive and mildly irritated. The stone floor is slick with flour, and your boots skid as you head to your post. Milling is deceptively brutal. People think you just sit around and wait for grain to turn into powder. But they forget the hauling, the tuning, the never-ending mechanical tinkering. Something's always stuck, leaking, or on fire. You've learned to listen for the difference between a healthy groan and a deadly one. And let's not forget the rats. They love the grain. You've tried traps, poison, cats. Nothing works. You once woke up to one sitting on your chest like it was judging your life choices. You start your day heaving sacks of barley and rye up into the hopper, your shoulders straining under the weight. Each sack easily weighs more than your dignity. You've dislocated a shoulder more than once. The doc popped it back in with the grace of a blacksmith shoeing a horse. Once the grain is fed into the hopper, it passes between two massive millstones. These stones are your life, too far apart, and the grain stays coarse, too close, and they grind each other down and possibly explode. You've seen it happen. Once a loose iron pin shot across the room like a medieval bullet and embedded itself in a beam. No one breathed for 5 minutes. Historians still argue whether millers were truly the most hated professionals in medieval towns or just the most resented. The position came with power. You controlled food, and food meant survival. That gave you leverage. And enemies. Lots of them. You were often accused of cheating, taking too much flour as payment, watering down grain, skimming extra from peasants. Most of the time, it wasn't even true. But try convincing an angry farmer that you didn't short him 3 ounces of rye meal. Go ahead. You'll be dodging pitchforks by sunset. A quirky note in some towns. You had to wear a specific hat, usually bright and ridiculous, so everyone knew who the miller was at all times. A warning label. Basically, your millstone sings today, which is a good sign. You adjust the flow of grain. Eyes locked on the mechanism. One bad pebble in the mix and the whole stone can crack. Then it's back to carving a new one. You've done that once. It took weeks. And your apprentice dropped the chisel on your foot twice. Outside, a line of villagers waits with grain sacks. Some nod. Others glare. You nod back. Keep it neutral. Politics and flour can get messy. You pause for lunch, if you can call it that. A bit of bread and hard cheese, eaten with your back against a flour sack. The rats eye you suspiciously, probably offended you didn't offer to share. By mid-afternoon, your hands are raw from rope and stone. Your lungs burn. You've inhaled enough flour to bake a modest pie just by sneezing. Suddenly, the wheel groans louder than usual. You rush to the gears, hard in your throat. A bolt is loose again. You shout for your apprentice, who responds like a startled goat. You fix it with a hammer, a prayer, and a strip of old leather. It'll hold. Probably. The sun dips low, and the final sacks of flour are measured, marked, and handed off. You tally everything in your little ledger because even if they don't trust you, you know your math. You dust yourself off, only to realize you've created a cloud that now clings to your sweat. You resemble a ghost, a tired, irritated ghost with calloused hands. You head home, weaving through the village, nodding to neighbors who might smile one day and accuse you the next. The mill looms behind you, a hulking wooden monster you love and hate in equal measure. At home, you wash in a cold basin, water instantly turning gray. Your partner rolls their eyes. Did you roll in it today? Fell in a sack. You say? They don't buy it. You sit down for dinner. More bread, more cheese, and you don't even taste it anymore. Later, as you lie in bed, you can still hear the wheel turning in your head. Grinding, always grinding. You wonder what it's like to be a baker, or a monk, or a fisherman. Anything without gears? But tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again. Because even when the wheel breaks you, you keep turning with it. You sit cross-legged in the corner of a velvet-draped chamber, trying not to wince as a cane whistles through the air and lands squarely across your bag. Again, you're not a criminal. You didn't steal bread or insult the bishop's hat. No, your crime was far worse being friends with a prince. You are a whipping boy, a strange and miserable solution to royal parenting. Your job is to suffer consequences that no one dares inflict on the future king. The logic is simple, and by simple, we mean wildly unfair. The prince can't be punished directly, so someone else you is punished in his place. The thinking is that if you hurt, he might feel guilt, or shame, or at least inconvenience. Spoiler, he usually doesn't. Right now, you're paying for a missed Latin lesson. Not your missed Latin lesson. His. The tutor glared at him. He shrugged, and then pointed a lazy finger at you. He'll take the strokes. And you did. 8 of them. Birch rod. Across the back. The prince watched with mild curiosity, like someone observing sheep shearing for the first time. He didn't blink. It's hard to stay friends with someone who has you whipped before lunch. You'd think this job would be reviled, but oddly, it's considered a kind of honor. You live in the palace. You wear decent clothes. You're fed well better than most servants. And more importantly, you have access. You hear things, see things. Sometimes you're even asked your opinion until you say something inconvenient. Historians still argue whether whipping boys were common across all European courts or largely confined to Tudor and Stuart England. The practice is oddly underdocumented, maybe because writing it down just felt wrong. But enough letters and accounts exist to suggest that, yes, this was a real job, one held by very real and frequently bruised boys. You and the prince grew up together, shared tutors, toys, meals. He once let you borrow his falcon, which immediately flew into the chimney. You both laughed for days, but those days are fewer now, because you've started noticing the difference. He lounges in brocade. You stand behind him like a glorified cushion. When he misbehaves, and he does, often you tense before the blow ever comes. The fear is reflex now. A quirky tidbit some records suggest whipping boys were taught to cry convincingly, even when strokes were light or symbolic. The idea was to make the prince believe his actions caused pain, even if they didn't. You haven't mastered fake crying, mostly because there's nothing fake about it. After the beating, you're dismissed with a nod. No apology. No thanks for taking that from me. Just a brief glance. Then the prince is back to playing chess with a diplomat. You walk slowly through the stone halls, sore and silent. The other servants avoid your gaze. Some pity you. Others resent your proximity to power. After all, you're still a royal companion. You eat with silver. You sleep on a feather-stuffed mattress. And you've seen the treasury up close. But no one envies your job. In the courtyard, a servant girl passes you a cloth soaked in cold water. You press it to your back and let out a hiss that echoes through the pillars. She doesn't speak, just nods once and disappears. Small kindnesses keep you going. You think about what would happen if you refused one day. Just stood your ground and said, "No more." The prince would laugh, maybe call for guards, maybe someone else would take your place, or maybe you'd vanish before morning. That's the thing about jobs built on traditions. No one questions they don't end until someone more powerful says they should. You return to your chamber. It's modest but comfortable. A book of psalms sits on your desk. You flip through it absent-mindedly. Searching for comfort, you land on a verse about suffering and silently snort. At dinner, the prince joins you, all smiles and roast lamb. He recounts a joke from the fencing master, then asks if your back still stings. You nod. He laughs and offers you a leg of lamb. You take it. Because what else can you do? He leans closer. You're lucky. You know, I wouldn't trust anyone else. You smile, woodenly. The crown is heavy. Yes, but the lashes fall on you. Later that night, you sit in the courtyard under the stars. You imagine being a carpenter, a monk, even a field hand. Anyone who answers for their own mistakes and no one else's. The sky is wide, your world is small, but somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, and for once, it's not for you. You exhale. Tomorrow might be worse. But for now, you're still standing. You crouch in the corner of a barn, eyes locked on the quivering mound of hay in front of you. You've got a burlap sack in one hand and a short notch stick in the other. You haven't blinked in 30 seconds. Not because you're scared, but because you mustn't miss. There it is. A flicker of movement. A pink tail snakes out from under the straw. Go time. You are a rat catcher, and your enemy is fast, sneaky, and almost certainly carrying at least one disease the town would rather not think about. Possibly the plague. Possibly worse. No one wants to ask which. You definitely don't. You lunge. The hay explodes into chaos. The rat darts sideways, then doubles back, and you smack the stick down with a satisfying thud. A squeak, a wriggle, then silence. One down. Dozens more to go. The townsfolk need you, but only from a distance. They'll pay you, sure, but you're not invited to dinner parties. No one hugs a rat catcher. And when you walk through the market, even the fishmongers give you a wide berth. You carry a certain smell. Earthy, slightly burnt, with notes of rodent. Still, it's a living. You get paid per tail. Or per corpse. If the customer's particularly distrusting, sometimes you're hired by the local baker who's discovered nibbled flour bags. Sometimes by a baron who heard scratching in the cellar and immediately blamed a conspiracy. Doesn't matter. If it's got teeth, fur, and a talent for multiplying, you're the one to call. Your tools are simple sacks, traps, terriers if you're lucky, and a grim sort of patience. You've tried everything: smoked tunnels, poisoned breadcrumbs, even musical whistles. That last one didn't work, but it earned you some coin for effort. Here's a quirky historical tidbit in some towns. Rat catchers carried special licenses from the local authorities and were allowed to parade through streets showing off their kills, sometimes even dressed in red. Like a grim pageant float of pest control, you spend most of your time in dark places: cellars, barns, sewers, crypts. Anywhere rats run free, you follow. You've crawled through drainage holes no sane person would look twice at. Once, you got wedged under a beam for 3 hours. The rats stared at you like you were the intruder. Historians still argue whether rat catchers really made a difference during outbreaks of plague, or if they just gave people a sense of control in a chaotic world. Some argue they made things worse by disrupting rodent populations and scattering fleas. But in your world, nuance doesn't matter. If the townspeople feel better when you show up with a sack of squirming tails, that's worth something. Today's haul is decent. 7 confirmed kills, 2 runners, 1 bite. You wrap your hand in linen and mutter a curse. It's not deep, but it's not good. Rat bites fester. You've seen it before: fingers swollen like sausages, skin gone green, fevers that end in shallow graves. You soak the wound in vinegar and tie it tight. Your best friend is your dog, a wiry terrier named Spindle. She's fearless, quick, and has a growl that scares even you sometimes. She's gotten more famous than you in some corners of the village. Once, a child asked if she could get her paw print instead of yours. You didn't take it personally. This afternoon, you head to the granary. Big job, high stakes. The grain stores are the village's lifeline through winter. If the rats ruin them, it's starvation season. You kneel by the sacks, listening. There it is. Scratching. Spindle lunges in before you can say a word. She's a blur of teeth and enthusiasm. 3 rats in a minute. You don't even bother with the sack. You just toss them in a bucket and nod to the foreman. He drops a few coins into your hand without meeting your eyes. That's the way it goes. They want you close enough to help, but not to know. You finish the day in the outskirts, setting traps behind a barn near the pig pens. You bait them with a mash of grain and honey, a trick you picked up from an old Frenchman who swore by it. You catch 5 before sundown. Your cloak smells like wet fur. Your fingers are scratched and twitchy, but you earned your pay. You trudge home through muddy paths. Some kids point and laugh. Rat man, rat man. You bare your teeth and they scatter. Spindle wags her tail. You both know you'll hear the same chorus tomorrow. You sleep in a shed just off the main road. It's dry, mostly. The roof leaks in spring, but it's quiet. And Spindle curls up by your feet like a furry furnace. As you lie down, you think about the time a rat fell from the rafters onto your head. You didn't scream. You did develop a minor twitch in your left eye that lasted a week. Still, there's pride in this. Quiet, strange pride. You face what others fear. You walk where they won't. You hear the scritching in the walls and don't run. You hunt shadows with a sack and a stick, and you always come back with something. The wind whips around the chalk quarry as you drag another basket of white rock toward the kiln. Your face is already coated in fine powder, sticking to the sweat on your brow, your lashes, even the inside of your mouth. Breathing feels like dragging air through a brick of flour. You are a lime burner, and every inhalation is a calculated risk. Lime quicklime, To be precise, is a key ingredient in mortar, whitewash, and depending who's paying you, chemical warfare. It's made by heating limestone until it literally cooks down to a fine caustic powder that will burn through your skin, lungs, and ego in seconds if you're not careful. The fire pit roars behind you. It's a massive stone structure, shaped like a beehive and hotter than a blacksmith's temper. Inside, the chunks of limestone you've spent all week hauling are being baked at temperatures high enough to melt the soles of your boots if you stand too close. The heat licks at your skin. Your tunic sticks to you like wet paper. You step back, wiping your mouth with a sleeve already white from powder. It doesn't help. The taste of lime is sharp, almost metallic, and somehow it's in everything your bread, your water, your hair. Your job is simple: feed the fire, monitor the stone, survive. The woodpile smolders beside you, logs dry and cracking. You toss another batch onto the flames. The smoke punches up into the air, mixing with lime dust and turning the sky a hazy gray. Somewhere, a crow coughs. One of your crew coughs too, a deep, gravelly bark that's become a kind of background noise. Everyone's got it. Some worse than others. You call it the lime lung. The local healer just shrugs and says, "Stop breathing it." Hilarious. Historians still argue whether lime burners were the lowest of the laborers, or a slightly elevated trade due to the technical precision required. You need to know exactly when the lime is done too short and it's useless, too long and it crumbles into garbage. It takes an eye, and a nose, and a level of tolerance for heat that makes smiths look like delicate flowers. Here's a quirky side note: some towns used quicklime to dispose of bodies during plagues, assuming it would speed decomposition. Turns out, it often did the opposite, preserving corpses like pickled ghosts. So there's a fun image to sit with. Your hands are calloused, but your fingertips are raw. You lost most of your fingernails last winter. The lime just eats them, one by one. Your gloves last about 3 days. After that, you might as well wrap your hands in old leaves and hope for the best. You don't get many visitors at the kiln. The stink keeps most people away, a sour, acrid scent that clings to your clothes like gossip. When you do go into town for supplies, the people step back. Some cross themselves. A child once asked if you were made of smoke. You liked that. Your shift ends when the stone starts to glow faintly inside the pit, a sign it's nearly ready. You use a long iron rod to stir the pile. One careless move and the dust explodes into the air like flour from a baker's bag. You learned that the hard way. You couldn't see for 2 days. Thought you'd gone blind. You finally pull the batch and let it cool. It hisses when it touches water, like a snake in a pot. The steam that rises is worse than the smoke. Breathe it in and your lungs seize like overcooked pudding. You cover the finished lime in clay and pack it into barrels. It'll be shipped off to builders, painters, even physicians. You try not to think about the fact that people eat small doses of this stuff in remedies. You know better, your apprentice. A quiet boy with a twitchy eye and an unnatural affection for chickens. Helps you seal the barrels. He asks if his cough will go away. You tell him the truth. Maybe. If you leave, he doesn't. You head home under a moon, pale as bone. Your clothes coated in dust. Your boots leave white prints on the path, like ghost tracks. You pass a group of townsfolk laughing around a fire. They go quiet when they see you. One coughs into his hand and looks away. You reach your hut bare, smoky, and close enough to the kiln that your dreams still crackle. You strip down and wash in cold water that turns milky within seconds. You eat your supper, stale bread, and a hunk of cheese that tastes like it's absorbed half your week's wages in soot. You lie back on your cot. Your muscles ache, your skin stings, and your eyes burn. You feel like you're being slowly turned to stone from the inside out. And tomorrow, you'll go back and feed the fire again? Because without the lime, the city crumbles. And without you, there is no lime. The sun sets, and that's your cue. You don't work during the day. That would be too visible. Too offensive, some say. Too smelly. Most agree. You wait until twilight, when the last vendors pack up their stalls and the streets start to empty. Then, like some medieval Batman but with a shovel and zero fanfare, you slink through back alleys and climb down into the worst places imaginable. You are a gong farmer. That name might sound like a bad insult, but it's actually your job title. Gong is the polite term for what you dig out of cesspit's human waste. Night soil? Excrement. Whatever euphemism helps people sleep at night while you're knee-deep in their leftovers, your tools are a long-handled shovel, a rope, a bucket, and boots you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. You're not just shoveling muck, you're performing a vital civic service. Because without you, the city becomes a public toilet. Fast, you open the wooden hatch behind a row of houses. The smell hits instantly thick, wet, and ancient. It's a blend of fermented misery and something you can't describe without violating medieval decency laws. You lower your bucket into the pit. It lands with a splash that sends a few choice droplets skyward. You try not to think about it. You've trained yourself to exist beside the disgust. Not above it, you gave up on that illusion years ago, but next to it. Like a polite roommate, you haul the bucket up. Hand over hand, your biceps straining. It's heavy. A single cesspit can hold years of waste. Sometimes decades. One job in York. The pit hadn't been cleaned since the reign of Edward III. You found buttons, bones, a doll's arm, and something that might have been a priest's shoe. You didn't ask. You dump the bucket into a barrel on your cart. Repeat. Over and over. All night. Historians still argue whether gong farmers were exclusively part of a night shift system, or if that was simply tradition and social pressure at work. Legally, some towns did restrict their activities to after dusk. But more often, it was just easier not to make eye contact during breakfast. A quirky side note in some places, the waste you collect is valuable. Farmers buy it by the cartload to fertilize fields. You once met a man who proudly claimed he could smell the difference between city dung and country dung. You believe him. You've stopped underestimating what noses can adapt to. Tonight's job is a row of merchant houses. Rich folk? That means nicer cesspits lined with stone, sometimes with little decorative touches. You've seen frescoes? Once a carved seat with a quote in Latin about purity. The irony nearly killed you. Still, the rich pay better, and they sometimes leave out a cup of ale for you. You don't drink it just in case, but it's a nice gesture. Your apprentice gags beside you. He's new. Still thinks this is temporary. He swore last week he'd be a mason by spring. You gave him 2 more nights. You finish the row by midnight and guide your cart through the sloped path to the dumping ground outside the city walls. It's a wide trench deep, dark, and bottomless in spirit. You tip the barrel, and the contents slide out with the sound you'll never describe. Ever? A cloud of flies rises like steam. You wipe your brow with the cloth you've used for 3 months. It no longer matters. Cleanliness is theoretical now. On the way back, a drunk stumbles into the street and calls you dung devil. You tip your hat. Better devil than dependent. You store your cart in a lean-to behind your hut. The neighbors have built high fences and pretend you don't exist. You don't blame them. Your boots stay outside. Always, even in winter. You wash in the river late at night when the moon's high and the town's asleep. The cold water burns, but it's better than smelling like your work until dawn. You lie in bed on a pile of straw with a thin wool blanket and try not to dream about falling into a pit. It's happened to people. You once had to dig out a man who slipped during a job and sank waist deep. He was never quite right after that. But you're careful. You tie your ropes tight. Keep your footing sure. Because in your line of work, one wrong step can bury you. Literally, you close your eyes. The taste of vinegar still in your mouth from rinsing. Your hands ache. Your back's a map of knots. But the city's clean. Or at least cleaner than it would be without you. You're invisible. Until you're not. And tomorrow night, the pits will be full again. The road is long, muddy, and utterly unkind to your backside. You bounce in your saddle, trying to shift just enough to keep your thighs from chafing into oblivion. Your cloak flaps behind you, soaked through at the hem. The rain's been falling for 2 straight days, and the parchment tucked inside your tunic itself, wrapped in 3 layers of waxed leather, is your most precious burden. You are a medieval messenger. And today, like every day, your life hangs on the thin thread of speed. There are no post offices here. No mailboxes, no stamps, no reliable donkeys wearing little hats. There is only you, a horse with questionable loyalty, and the hope that the bandits currently operating on this stretch of road are napping. The message in your coat, it's from a bishop to a noble, or a king to a general, or a merchant to his partner in the next town over. Doesn't matter. Your job is the same. Get there fast. Get there in one piece and don't peek. You've peeked once. It was a love letter, written in the kind of poetry that makes your teeth hurt. You tried not to judge, but the line about thy glistening ankle still haunts you. The mud sucks at your horse's hooves. The forest to your left is dense and whispering. You keep one hand on your dagger. It's not much of a weapon, more like a pointed suggestion, but you've used it before. Once you waved it at a pack of wolves, who seemed more amused than threatened. You think they spared you out of pity? Historians still argue whether messengers were considered official parts of the noble household or just expendable freelancers. Some were well paid, wore fine livery, and had legal protection. Others were just fast guys with low standards and a high pain tolerance. You fall into the second camp. You reach a crossroads and pause. One path is shorter, but floods easily. The other curves uphill and has the added risk of bandit activity. You flip a coin. It lands in the mud. You choose the hill. Halfway up, the wind picks up, bringing with it the scent of wet pine and distant chimney smoke. You tuck your chin down and ride harder. If you don't make it to the next way station by sundown, you'll have to sleep under a tree again. Last time, a hedgehog crawled into your boot. You didn't discover it until morning. It was awkward. A quirky side note, some messengers were trained to memorize messages instead of carrying letters. especially when secrecy was vital. You tried that once, made it halfway through a noble's 30-line decree before you forgot the name of the tax he was repealing. He gave you a look that could curdle milk. You stick to scrolls now. You finally see the town on the horizon, stone walls, flickering torches, and the faint promise of dry socks. You ride up to the gatehouse and flash your seal. The guard squints at you. He doesn't like messengers. They bring bad news as often as good, yeah, but he lets you in. You dismount, legs shaking, and head straight to the manor. The steward takes the message without a word and vanishes. You wait awkwardly in the hall, dripping onto a carpet that probably costs more than your annual income. Eventually, someone tosses you a coin. It's not much, just enough for a hot meal, a stable fee, and a few spare bandages. You spend the night at the inn, chewing on mutton and dodging questions from locals who all seem suspicious of anyone carrying sealed letters. You're used to it. You speak only when necessary. Too much information, and you might wake up in a ditch. You fall asleep to the sound of rain on the shutters and the creak of horses in the stable below. Your body aches. Your cloak smells like mildew and horse. You dream of traveling somewhere without urgency. Somewhere with wine and no wolves. By dawn, there's another letter waiting for you. A fresh seal. A new direction. 50 miles north. Over the moors. You sigh. Pull your boots on. Mount your grumpy steed and ride. Because the world runs on messages. And you're the one who keeps it talking. The air shifts as you duck into the tunnel, cool, damp, and still. A kind of silence you can feel pressing against your skin. It's the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat sound loud. Too loud. You strike a spark. The candle flares weakly. It's not much light, but it'll have to do. You are a lead miner, and this tunnel is your second home, and your slow death. You crouch, crawling forward on hands and knees. The shaft narrows so tightly in places. Your shoulders scrape the walls. You've memorized every twist of this passage. Not because you want to, but because getting lost means running out of air. Your candle flickers. You check the ceiling instinctively. Sometimes they sag before collapsing. Sometimes they don't. You finally reach the chamber. Your work site. If you can call a jagged crevice with barely enough space to kneel a chamber. The air tastes metallic. Thick. Like blood pennies and dust. You cough again and spit. The black flecks aren't going away. You grip your pickaxe and get to work, chipping at the vein of gray lead glinting like dull silver in the stone. You don't swing hard. That's how people break arms. Or worse, destabilize the wall. No, you chip. Patient. Steady. One chunk falls free and your fingers are already numb. You drop it into a leather satchel and keep going. Historians still argue whether medieval miners truly understood how toxic lead was, or if they simply ignored the signs. Some records show awareness of miner's disease, a slow, wasting illness with headaches, shaking, blackened gums. Others suggest they thought it was just bad air, or a curse, or punishment for working underground. Probably a little of everything. You know the signs, even if you don't name them. The trembling in your hands, the dark lines in your gums, the way your joints crack louder each month. You've seen stronger men than you crawl out of the shafts and never return. One quirky note: some miners believed canaries could warn of deadly gases. But birds are expensive, and you're not exactly flush with coin. You once tried using a rat, but it just curled up and went to sleep. Useless. You hear a creak behind you? Freeze. Silence. Then a faint drip? Water? Not collapse? Yet. You shift your weight and keep digging. Your candle's half gone? That's your clock. When it burns out, so does your shift, whether you're done or not. Your knees throb, your back spasms, you twist and stretch, only to crack something between your ribs. You hiss through your teeth and keep going. You've got 4 satchels to fill before you can even think about quitting. You were 10 when you first came down here. Your father led you, showed you how to spot a good seam, told you to always listen more than you look. Said, the rock will talk to you if you let it. You've been listening ever since. You pause to drink from a canteen. The water tastes like leather and mold, but it's wet, and that's all that matters. You pour a little on your scarf and tie it back around your mouth. It helps slightly with the dust. Slightly. You shift position and bump something solid. Bone. A femur, maybe. You recognize it by shape. It's old, dry, tucked in a pocket of the tunnel like a forgotten tool. You nod at it. You've met him before? Doesn't talk much. You keep digging. Eventually, you've got your fill. You shimmy back through the tunnel, dragging the sacks behind you. Your muscles burn. Your shoulders howl. But you make it to the surface. The light stabs at your eyes. You squint. You're filthy. Covered in soot, sweat, and that never-ending silver-gray film that stains your clothes and skin and soul. The overseer doesn't look at you, just counts the sacks and hands you your coin. Not much. Enough for bread, onions, maybe a bit of salt pork if the merchant isn't gouging again. You nod, walk past the other miners, past the wheelbarrows and donkeys, toward the shed where you scrape the worst of the grime off with a dull knife. The townsfolk eye you when you come through the square. Some pity, some contempt, some fear. They know what you carry: lead, poison, money, and death. You reach home one room, shared with your sister and 2 cousins. You rinse in a cold basin. Your spit turns gray. Your nails are cracked. Your teeth hurt. But you sit down to dinner. You laugh at your cousin's joke about goats. You chew slowly, even though your gums ache. Because you're still breathing. And tomorrow, you'll crawl back in again. Before the roosters have even considered waking, you're already elbows deep in a wooden tub full of yesterday's dishwater, scraping crusted porridge off pewter plates with a sliver of reed, and something that might once have been a sponge. You are a scullery maid, and no one notices you unless something smells off or breaks. You're the bottom of the kitchen hierarchy. Beneath the cook, the assistant cook, the pastry girl, the chicken plucker, and possibly the cat. The only thing beneath you, the drain. And that's debatable. You scrub, rinse, repeat. The cold water numbs your fingers before the sun's up, and even when it's warm, it's always dirty. You gave up on having nice hands months ago. Now your knuckles are always red, your nails a battleground, your palms lined with tiny cuts and burns from boiling pans. The kitchen is a war zone, knives flashing, pots crashing, and a never-ending stream of commands barked with the urgency of an invasion. But you stay quiet. You stay quick. You move like steam, always shifting, always vanishing, always present. Today's special, a noble feast, which means double portions, double dishes, and triple the yelling. You have approximately 2 hours to polish a set of goblets that look like they've been used to feed goats. You begin with vinegar and salt, an old trick passed down by the last scullery maid before she ran off with a traveling poet. You still miss her. You carry buckets to and from the well. Balance trays on your head through uneven corridors, and dodge the cook's flying ladle, which she swears is accidental. No one believes her. Historians still argue whether scullery maids in larger households had any upward mobility, or if most spent their entire careers in the steam and soot. Some did rise if they could cook, clean, and flatter in just the right proportions. But for most, it was a job for life, or at least until their backs gave out. Here's a quirky tidbit: some scullery maids were tasked with collecting ashes from the hearth to make lye soap used to scrub not only the dishes, but also their own hair. Because nothing says clean like smearing soot ash paste into your scalp and hoping for the best. Lunch service hits like a thunderstorm. You're carrying tureens of thick stew and trays of trencher bread, carved out slabs of stale loaves, used instead of plates. The lords will eat the tops and toss the greasy bottom bits your way. Luxury leftovers? You've had worse. You scurry through narrow service corridors, heart-pounding as a tray of eel pie teeters dangerously to one side. A quick pivot, a stumble, saved barely. You exhale like someone just diffused a bomb. The floors are always slippery. The fire's always roaring. The meat spit roasts nonstop, and someone always forgets to secure the goose. You once watched it fly off mid-turning like a flaming comet. No one was injured, except the goose. You get yelled at when the roast isn't hot enough, when the ale jug is cracked, when someone misplaces the spice pouch. Spoiler, it's usually the kitchen steward's fault. You take the blame anyway. Your clothing is a patchwork of patches. You wash it nightly and it still smells faintly of turnips, sweat, and failure. Your cap slips down over your forehead and you shove it back up with the back of your wrist. Your hands are too wet. Dinner begins at dusk. You crouch behind the kitchen doors as dishes go out. One by one, stewed hare, boiled beef, roasted onions, honey-glazed carrots. You drool involuntarily. Someone sneaks you a crust of cheese. You want to weep. As they eat, you clean. You prepare for the wave of chaos that is the after-dinner mess. Bones, gristle, half-gnawed marrow. You scrape it all into slop buckets for the pigs. You scrub trays stained with sauces that defy the laws of flavor and color. You fish forks out of jellied wine. You clean the hearths. You wipe down walls. You wring out cloths that have seen things no linen should ever see. And when the final pot is scoured, you collapse on a wooden bench with a groan that echoes down the stone hallway. Someone lights a single candle. It's the nicest thing you've seen all day. You eat what's left, mostly roots and bits of bread too stale for anyone else. You don't mind. It's food. It's yours. You sleep in a tiny corner space, behind the grain sacks and under the stairs. A rat sniffs your boot. You hiss, it vanishes. You both understand the rules. As your eyes drift shut, you hear the cook muttering about tomorrow's pudding. You know it'll involve 40 eggs, a cauldron the size of your future, and a scolding so hot it might char your eyebrows. And you'll be ready. Because scullery maids may be at the bottom, but without you. The entire kitchen comes to a boiling, screaming, greasy halt. Stone dust hangs in the air like mist as you chisel your way into another stubborn slab of limestone. The sound of your hammer echoing against cathedral walls, not yet finished. A single blow rings out sharp, controlled then another, and each one shaving off centuries of patience in tiny flakes. You are a stone mason, and today you balance between art and agony. It's a craft people admire from a distance. They look up at the soaring towers of cathedrals, the flying buttresses, the intricate tracery and cloister windows, and they gasp. Few wonder how it got there. Fewer still imagine the blisters, bruises, and close calls involved. You start your day sharpening your tools, chisels, mallets, hammers, all with names and personalities. The big one you call the Persuader. The thin one is Whisper, because sometimes a stone needs coaxing and sometimes it needs a loud argument. You scale the scaffold to your post, a narrow plank about 6 stories above ground. The wind is playful today. One step too confident and you'll be reborn as a cautionary tale. You crouch, legs shaking slightly, and set your chisel against the block. The design is complex and arch with a series of spiraling leaves. You were given a sketch on parchment, barely readable. Improvise, the master mason said, which really means make it pretty, but don't mess it up or the bishop will yell. Your fingers tremble with precision. One bad chip and you'll need to start the whole block over. That's 3 weeks of hauling, measuring, and dreaming down the drain. And that's assuming the block doesn't fall onto someone's head. It's happened. Historians still argue whether masons were paid daily or by the piece. Some cathedrals offered stable wages, others ran on unpredictable contracts. You've seen both and you prefer payment that doesn't vanish with the master mason's sudden disappearance. A quirky side note, master masons sometimes carved secret symbols into their stones. Not for decoration, but for accountability. If a wall collapsed, they could trace which craftsman did what. Like a medieval version of signing your work with consequences. You're proud of your symbol. A tiny curled leaf tucked into the corner of each piece. No one notices. That's how you like it. The sun moves slowly overhead, but you barely notice. The work absorbs you. It demands your body, your mind, your patience. You stop only when your arms go numb or when the bell tolls for the mid-meal break. You descend carefully, ladder rungs slick with dew and dust. Lunch is bread, a piece of smoked fish, and water from a shared jug. You eat on the ground, back against a half-finished wall. Nearby, someone's arguing about whether angels should have 1 wing or 2. You stay out of it. You've carved both. Back to the scaffold. The wind has picked up. The ropes creak. The mortar down below glistens like wet chalk. You keep your balance by instinct now. You learn the hard way not to lean into a carving. The scars on your chest and shoulder remind you daily. Your apron is crusted in white. Your lungs ache. No one talks about what years of breathing stone dust does. You just start coughing one winter and never really stop. You once helped carve a gargoyle, your favorite job. It had a dog's face and bat wings. You gave it your uncle's nose. Just for fun. It sits on the edge of the west tower now. Drooling rainwater. You like to think of it as your watchdog, even if it's made of silence. Sometimes the bishop walks by to inspect progress. He's always impressed, never generous. Faster, he says, while pointing at stone that's taken 2 months to shape. You nod, then ignore him. You can't rush a cathedral. Not if you want it to stand. Evening falls and you descend again, legs shaking with each rung. Your back is stiff, your hands cracked. But you feel the quiet satisfaction of a day's work left in stone. Your hut is a short walk away. nestled among others in the mason's quarters. You wash in a barrel, water gritty with powdered stone. You rub your arms and watch the dust swirl down the drain. It never fully leaves. Dinner is warm, barley stew and beer. Your apprentice brags about his first gargoyle. It's hideous. You praise it anyway. Let him enjoy the moment. The stone will teach him humility soon enough. You fall asleep with your arms curled around aching ribs, your legs twitching from the scaffolding sway. In your dreams, you're still carving a cathedral made of clouds, your chisel tapping stars into place. And in the morning, you'll climb again. Because long after you're gone, your work will reach for the heavens. The cauldron gurgles as it boils over, bubbling with something between a potion and a questionable soup. Your face is flushed, not from embarrassment, but from the open flame roasting your knees. You grab a ladle carved from bone, don't ask whose, and stir the thick, silver-black sludge like your life depends on it. Because it might. You are an alchemist's assistant, and you're one bad mix away from becoming a cautionary explosion. The alchemist you serve is a genius. Or a lunatic. Possibly both. He smells like sulfur, sleeps 3 hours a night, and talks to the ceiling when he's thinking. He calls you boy even though you're 27 and once killed a weasel with a spoon. You're the one who lights the fires, fetches the frog bile, and organizes the mercury vials by mood. Today's assignment: transmute base metals into gold. Again. It's never worked before. Of course. But hope springs eternal when you're convinced the philosopher's stone is just one step away. Or buried under your pantry. Or hiding in your pocket and you're too stupid to realize it. The lab is chaos. Scrolls litter every surface. Half-burnt manuscripts stuffed under beakers and shattered glass. There's a mysterious green powder on your boots. And you sincerely hope it's not frog-related this time. You prepare the ingredients: lead shavings, crushed ruby, vinegar aged in a saint's skull, actually just a wine barrel with dramatic labeling, and something labeled volatile salts. Do not sniff. You sniffed once. Once. A quirky side note: some alchemists swore by aurum potabile, drinkable gold, as a cure-all elixir. They dissolved actual gold in alcohol and served it like divine medicine. One noble turned bright yellow from overuse. You're not sure if it worked, but he was very visible at night. Historians still argue whether alchemy was genuine science or elaborate con artistry. Truth is, it was both. It laid the groundwork for chemistry, but it also featured a fair amount of smoke, mirrors, and desperate guesswork. Like now, as your master orders you to recite the invocation of sulphurous clarity while balancing a bowl of molten copper over your head, you comply. Because what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen, in case you're wondering, involves an indoor fire tornado. You've seen one. The fumes sting your eyes. You grab the bellows and pump air into the furnace, keeping the heat consistent. Temperature is crucial, too cold, and the mixture clots, too hot, and the lead vaporizes into a poison fog. You did that once and spent 3 days thinking the cat could speak Latin. The cat has never forgiven you. You wear a leather apron and thick gloves, but there's always something the protection misses. Your eyebrows have regrown mostly. You still flinch at thunder. The alchemist, meanwhile, is dancing. Not metaphorically. He's genuinely twirling, muttering a chant in Old Occitan, waving a wand he carved from a tree that got struck by lightning. He claims the wand sings when it's near gold. It hasn't sung yet, but it does hum when it's near pickled garlic, which might count. You sneak a glance at the manuscript he's been working on. It's called De Materia Mirabilis, and it's mostly sketches of circles, animals with 3 heads, and one diagram labeled The Process of Becoming Fire. You don't ask. Your job is mostly to stay alive and keep the lab from collapsing. That includes restocking ingredients, extinguishing things not meant to be aflame, and remembering which vials are safe to open during a thunderstorm. Hint, very few. You've been burned, bitten, splashed, and nearly turned into a vapor once. You've also learned more about the properties of minerals than most cathedral builders. If your lungs weren't full of powdered antimony, you'd be quite proud. Dinner is a shared heel of bread and a goblet of wine infused with medicinal properties. You don't ask. You just drink it, even though your tongue tingles and you briefly forget your middle name. The alchemist declares today a minor success. No explosions, no smoke monsters, we made progress. You nod. The room still smells like burnt cabbage and regret, but sure progress. As the sun sets, you clean the lab, scrape the lead crust from the cauldron, sweep up powdered charcoal, and quietly remove a beaker that started glowing on its own. You tuck it into the unstable, watch closely shelf. Your master mutters about dreams of immortality and base transmutation as he drifts into sleep on a pile of unfinished formulas. You pull a blanket over his shoulders. He's strange, but kind. Mostly. You lay on your cot, a few feet from the alchemical furnace, warmed by both fire and exhaustion. The stone floor is hard. The candle flickers. You dream of gold that doesn't vanish, of elixirs that heal instead of explode, of discovering something real. Even if the world laughs, because even if you're the one who stirs the pot, one day you might be the one to crack the code. The hillside stretches out in front of you, rippling with heather and wind. The air is damp, laced with the earthy scent of moss. Mud. And you guessed it, sheep. So many sheep. You are a shepherd. And your job is simple, keep the flock alive. The complexity lies in the fact that sheep, for all their fluff and docility, appear to be doing everything in their power to die spectacularly and inconveniently. You lean on your crooked staff and squint toward the far ridge. There's movement. Probably just old Gert. You're one-eyed you with the survival instincts of a loaf of bread. She's always wandering into bogs or nearly tumbling into ravines. She's survived a wolf attack, a lightning storm, and somehow a beehive. You admire her, even if she's dumber than a pickled beet. Your boots sink slightly into the muck as you tramp across the moor, trailing your herd as they meander toward a patch of grass that looks greener, probably because it's growing over someone's forgotten turnip cellar. Shepherding sounds peaceful, and it is right until it's not. You face long days of isolation, brutal weather, and the constant fear that your most valuable assets will wander off. Get eaten or stage a mutiny. You carry a sling in your belt pouch for flinging rocks, not at wolves usually, but to ping the ground near stragglers. It's not violent, it's motivational. Historians still argue whether medieval shepherds were mostly hired hands or landholding peasants tending communal flocks. Evidence suggests both. You're definitely the hired kind. Paid in coin, bread, and the occasional wheel of questionable cheese. The flock moves slowly, with no urgency. You, meanwhile, are scanning for threats. wolves, foxes, thieves. You once saw a local noble's bored nephew try to borrow a sheep for a wrestling match. He left limping. You let him limp. You carry a pouch of basic tool shears, a skinning knife just in case, waxed twine, a scrap of dried apple, and a carved whistle that you use to signal the dogs. Today it's just you and Bramble, a wiry collie with more intelligence in her left paw than the village reeve has in his whole head. You whistle. She darts out, circling wide, guiding the tail end of the flock away from a boggy dip that's claimed more hooves than you'd care to count. Good girl. A quirky tidbit some shepherds slept out with their flocks in mobile shelters, essentially wooden boxes on wheels with a straw bed inside. You've got one, but most nights, you just curl up under your cloak and try not to dream of hooves in your face. You pause at midday, sitting on a flat rock as your charges nibble lazily at the grass. Lunch is stale bread, a piece of dried sausage, and a sip of bitter beer. You chew slowly, watching the horizon. Clouds roll in low, heavy, and suspicious. You tug your hood tighter. The rain starts without warning. As usual. You're already soaked. You gave up on staying dry years ago. What matters is keeping the sheep from panicking. You call Bramble with two sharp whistles. She bounds into action, herded muscle wrapped in mud. Together, you and your four-legged partner guide the flock to a rocky outcrop that offers just enough shelter to avoid catastrophe. You sit under a ledge, rain dripping from your nose, counting heads. 53. Still all here. Even Gert, who is chewing a boot she definitely didn't arrive with. Evening falls, and you lead the flock toward the stone pen you built by hand last year. It's crude but solid. A few more repairs, and you might survive a windstorm without having your entire flock take a scenic walk to the next county. Once they're penned, you check hooves fore-limp slightly. You'll clean and wrap them tomorrow. You rub liniment into your own knees. They're starting to complain louder every month. You light a small fire and huddle close, drying your gloves on a stick. Your bed tonight is straw and wool, with Bramble curled up beside you. You pull your cloak over both of you and watch the stars fight their way through the clouds. Sheep baa softly in the dark. You hum a low tune your mother used to sing, something about harvest moons and safe returns. You don't remember the words, just the shape of them. And you sleep. Because tomorrow the flock wanders again. And you'll follow. Because that's what shepherds do. You grip the heavy rope with calloused fingers, heart pounding in time with the rising clang that shakes the tower from stone to spire. The bell swings again, a booming arc of bronze and noise, and your arms scream with the strain. You are a bell ringer, and your ears will never be the same. The cathedral tower looms high above the town, and at its peak hangs a bell so large it could flatten your cousin's ox cart. You've been up here since before dawn, hauling, yanking, timing every pull with a rhythm passed down by muscle memory and shouted tradition. The job isn't just noise, it's responsibility. Bells mark life's most sacred beats. Birth, marriage, death. They call the faithful to prayer, warn of fire, celebrate coronations, and signal curfews. And someone has to make them sing. That someone is you. With sweat, technique, and the very real risk of being yanked off your feet if your timing is off by even a breath. This isn't a gentle tug-tug. You don't get to lean delicately on the rope and smile. No. Ringing a medieval bell is full contact work. You leap, sometimes literally, into the pull, your feet leaving the ground as the bell surges downward, dragging the rope and you with it. The air inside the tower is dusty, a mix of bird droppings, dried mortar, and something that smells like haunted rope. You're shirtless by midday because the heat is unbearable. You drip sweat onto the wooden floor with each heave, and the sound. Oh, the sound. The first few weeks, you stuffed wax into your ears, then cotton, then lamb's wool. Nothing helped. The vibrations travel through you, not just into your ears. It's like being inside a thunderstorm that's shouting your name. Historians still argue whether early bell ringers suffered permanent hearing damage or just temporary dazing. You could answer that. You haven't heard a whisper properly in years. You nod a lot and hope for the best. A quirky side note: some towns believed bells could ward off storms and evil spirits. Ringers would be called upon to climb up and sound them during tempests in the belief that the peals would scatter demons. One time you had to ring during a lightning storm, and you're pretty sure it did scare something away. Possibly your own soul. The cathedral's main bell. Lady Heart is as tall as a man and twice as stubborn. You know her moods. On humid days, she drags. On cold ones, she jolts like a startled ox. You whisper to her sometimes, not because you're mad, but because it helps. You have a team. Thankfully, it's not a one-man job, unless that one man is a giant with forearms like tree trunks. You take turns pulling and resting, wiping your hands on wool rags and gulping water that tastes faintly of rope mold. Each bell has a tone and a purpose. The small bell. Little Mary rings for vespers and weddings. Lady Heart tolls for the dead. You never get used to that one. When she tolls slow and heavy, the sound seems to stretch across the countryside, echoing into memory. You've seen people stop in the streets when they hear it. Hats off, heads bowed, eyes glistening. And for a moment, your ringing becomes something sacred. Then your palms split open again, and you're reminded sacred work still hurts. You once lost grip mid-pull and went flying across the belfry. You cracked 2 ribs and woke up with a ringing in your ears louder than the actual bell. You laughed, then cried, then got back up. Your wages aren't great, but they come with lodging. A narrow room just beneath the bell chamber, close enough that you've mastered sleeping through earthquakes. Your bed frame vibrates constantly, even when no bell's ringing. You've learned to love it. You eat in the cathedral kitchen, sitting near the scullery maids and scribes. Everyone nods at you respectfully. You're part of the church. Sort of, but you don't wear robes. Your vestments are rope burns and bruises. When not ringing, you maintain the tower. That means oiling mechanisms, checking for rot, and chasing off the pigeons that insist on nesting behind the clappers. You once found an entire roasted chestnut hidden in a nook. How, why, you'll never know. As the sun sets, you prepare for evening bells. You light a lantern and climb the stairs again, winding narrow, each one etched with centuries of boot prints. At the top, the ropes sway like pendulums in the dark. You take your place, wrap your fingers, plant your feet, pull. And Lady Heart answers. A deep, rich tone rolls out over rooftops. It echoes down valleys and across fields. It stirs souls and shakes rafters. You grin through gritted teeth. The sound owns you now. And in the ringing, you feel alive. You step out into the square just as the market crowd hits its peak, buzzing with gossip, clanging with carts, and teetering on the edge of mild chaos. You clear your throat, lift your bell, and ring it with practiced flair. Oh yeah, oh yes, you are the town crier, and your voice is your weapon, your charm, your burden, and occasionally your downfall. You shout the day's proclamations, decrees from the crown, tax notices, news of arrests, bans on dancing again, and the occasional lost pig. You bellow with authority, clarity, and a volume that makes the tavern bard look like a whispering monk. The crowd quiets, slowly. Not because they like you, but because you are legally the voice of the law. Interrupting you is punishable, though that doesn't stop people from coughing loudly or muttering sarcastic replies under their breath. You hear everything. You just pretend not to. Today's announcements include a new grain levy, a ban on hawking fish in front of the abbey. You really hope it wasn't personal. And a marriage proclamation for two minor nobles. You read it with extra flair. A swooning Lady Gwendolen of Wattlebridge always earns a chuckle. Your voice echoes off stone and timber, trailing into alleyways. Your bell glints in the sun, polished just enough to distract from the frayed hem of your cloak and the fact that your boots squeak like distressed mice. The job pays in coin and tomato dodging. Because as much as people need you, you're also the bearer of bad news. And people don't like bad news. Historians still argue whether town criers were considered officials or glorified jesters. In some towns, they held rank and privilege. In others, they were treated like walking parchment scrolls with delusions of grandeur. You suspect your town leans toward the latter. A quirky side note, town criers often wore bright, elaborate uniforms. Not just for visibility, but so they couldn't blend into a crowd and escape. You've tried. Once. During a particularly aggressive reaction to a church tax notice. The blue and yellow stripes gave you away. You finish the morning round and head to the guild hall, voice still resonating in your chest. You rub your throat and sip from a flask of warm ale mixed with honey, and time a remedy from the old crier before you. He lost his voice permanently yelling about road tolls during a thunderstorm. You keep his bell on your shelf. The scribe hands you a fresh roll of parchment. More proclamations. More reasons for people to pretend they didn't hear you the first time. You walk the streets with your scroll tucked under your arm, bell in hand. You stop at the tavern, the butcher's stall, the churchyard. Always the same routine ring. Shout. Try not to flinch. By noon, your throat burns. Your face is flushed. Your dignity's taken at least one good jab from an old woman who claims your voice scares her geese into laying sideways eggs. You apologized last week. This week, you just nod. There are perks. You hear everything. Secrets slip out in whispers and laughter. And people forget how well you listen. You know who's cheating, who's smuggling, who's been drinking from the bishop's private cask. You could make trouble, but that's not your job. You deliver the message. You don't write it. In the afternoon, you read an execution notice. The mood shifts. People shuffle uneasily. No tomatoes this time, just silence. You lower your voice slightly. Soften your cadence. Still loud enough to be heard, but just quiet enough to let them mourn. Later, you find a quiet bench near the baker's shop. She hands you a roll, fresh from the oven. You thank her with a tip of your bell. She pretends not to hear. Everyone does. You nap briefly, head tilted back, dreaming of applause. When you wake, a dog is sniffing your boots, You pat its head and move on. Evening comes, and with it your final cry, the curfew bell. You ring it slow and deep, voice hoarse now but steady. All good folk to hearth and home, by the grace of His Majesty the King. Let the streets fall quiet and the lamps burn low. The crowd thins, doors shut, torches flicker. A hush settles over the cobblestones. You return to your lodging, one room above the cobbler's, walls lined with scrolls and bells of different weights. You keep the lightest for market days, the heaviest for royal births. You eat your supper stew and stale wine and soak your throat with a boiled herb tonic that tastes like spoiled grass. You hum a few scales to test what voice you'll have left by morning. And you sleep with one ear open, always ready to wake and shout the dawn back into the world, because the people need to hear. And your voice still carries. The water is cold, very cold. Your legs are already numb up to the knees, but you keep wading through the thick, marshy bog with the kind of resigned dread that only someone in your profession understands. You are a leech collector, and you make your living by letting blood-sucking worms feast on your flesh on purpose. It's just before dawn, the sky smeared in slate-gray streaks, and the mist curls low over the fen like a secret. You take slow, careful steps, bare feet sinking into mud that squelches in protest. There's no way to avoid the squirming things beneath the surface. You just try not to think too hard about what's brushing past your ankles. The bag slung at your hip is nearly empty. That'll change soon because your legs are the bait. You stand very still. Wait. And then you feel it? A tickle, at first. Then the sharp little pinch, like a needle dipped in slime. 1, 2, 3. You count them as they attach. Most leech collectors work in twos. But today you're alone. You draw in a sharp breath, trying not to flinch as another clamps on behind your knee. That spot always bleeds the most. It's a slow, macabre process. You let them drink their fill, then pluck them off gently, drop them into the jar with a wet plop. Repeat. Your legs, by the end of the day, will look like you got into a fight with the thorn bush and lost. Here's a fun little tidbit: leeches were considered medicinal gold in the Middle Ages. Physicians believed they balanced the humors by drawing out excess blood, bile, or evil vapors. Noblemen, monks, even kings would pay handsomely for a jar of fat. Hungry leeches. Historians still argue whether the demand for leeches was based on any genuine medical benefit or purely on the persuasive power of medieval pseudoscience. There's some evidence that leech therapy helped with specific ailments: black eyes, congested wounds, but was also the go-to for everything from headaches to heartbreak. So people needed leeches, which meant someone had to go into the bogs to find them. That someone is you. You shuffle forward through the reeds. You've got an eye for leech spots now: quiet pools, shady banks, water that's just the right kind of murky. And you've learned how to time your catches. Leeches are hungriest at dawn. Like nobles, really. You lift your leg and pluck another bloated one from your calf. It's the size of your thumb and already dark with blood. You drop it in the jar and rinse your hand in the black water. The bite still oozes a little. It always does. Your socks will be a horror story later. A quirky trick of the trade: some collectors used old horses or cows as bait instead of themselves. Tie up the beast, wait an hour, and then harvest the leeches crawling all over its legs. It's safer. It's also, unfortunately, more expensive. And you don't own a cow, so it's your blood or nothing. You stop to rest on a patch of dry grass. If dry is what you can call ground that squishes when you sit on it, your jar's half full. You cover it with the scrap of waxed cloth and tighten the lid. No one wants escapees. You've seen what happens when they get loose in a cart. You lost 2 apprentices that day. One quit. The other fainted into a stream and woke up with 3 leeches on his neck. By midday, your legs are dotted with red rings and your fingers are trembling from cold. But you've got your quota. 50 fat, writhing leeches. Enough to sell to the apothecary and maybe the barber surgeon if he's in one of his cheerful, bleeding moods. You make your way back across the marsh, slow and limping, each step squishing with that awful wet straw sound. The mud sucks at your feet like it's reluctant to let you go. The sun is just starting to burn away the mist. You pass a farmer who nods at you, nose wrinkling. The smell of bog water and leech slime follows you like a loyal dog. No one gets too close. Back in the village, you hand off the jar to the apothecary. He doesn't thank you, just counts the leeches, grunts, and drops a few coins into your palm. Not enough. Never enough. But it's more than nothing. You rinse your legs in cold well water. The bleeding doesn't stop right away. Some wounds gush for hours. You wrap strips of cloth around your calves and hope your boots don't soak through before supper. You head home through the back alleys. Kids stare. One little boy points and shouts, "Swamp legs." You smile, sort of. Your cottage is small, mossy, and filled with jars empty, washed, lined in rows for the next dawn. You sit at the hearth, legs elevated, and chew your bread slowly. Your reflection in the kettle is pale, tired, and speckled with bandages. You stare into the flames, the soft crackle of wood offering a rare kind of comfort. The leeches are gone, sold, sated, for now. Tomorrow, you'll return to the swamp. You always do. Because someone's got to fill the jars, and you're just brave or broke enough to keep doing it. The leeches are behind you now. The bell tower has fallen quiet. The smell of the tannery fades, replaced by the soft hush of a nighttime breeze brushing through candlelit stone alleys. You've walked through fire pits, crawled beneath cities, and carried the weight of kings and their bowel movements. You've scrubbed, bled, shouted, dug, and herded under skies both stormy and serene. And now you can rest. Let your breath slow. Let the mud slip from your boots. You've earned a little peace, even if just for tonight. The brutal world of medieval work, as full of grit as it was of quiet nobility, drifts into the past. You stood in the shadows where no one else dared, and through the cold, the blood, and the stink, you mattered. You made things. You cleaned things. You protected. You built. You kept the world turning even when it turned against you. And now the fire's burning low. The tools are hung. The bells have stopped ringing. Let the stillness settle in. Let the dark wrap you like a warm, woolen cloak. Outside, the sheep huddle in the hills. Somewhere, a scullery maid turns in her sleep. And deep below the streets, a tunnel lies silent for once. You're safe. Close your eyes. You don't have to shovel, wring, chase, or dig anymore. Just breathe. Let history rest with you now. You've survived 1,000 brutal days in a world that asked for everything and gave back little. But tonight it gives you sleep.